is it in Shmos, or is it in Bamidbar, or is it in Devarim? It's giving us a different message. So it's not just repeating the mitzvah, but it's repeating the mitzvah with a different perspective based on what the notion of what that relationship that we're discussing, is it the formation, is it the development of the individual, is it the nation? So one of the things I guess we have to ask is that Leviticus, that's Vayikra, the third out of the 5 Svarim, is also known by our sages as Torah HaKohanim, the laws of the Kohanim, because it deals with the service in the Beis HaMikdash. And the question, therefore, has to be asked that the Mishkan in the desert really was the precursor of the building of the Beis HaMikdash when they came into the land of Israel. And the halachos, many of them the same, even the dimensions of how the Mishkan was built, and it's all based on the blueprint of the Mishkan. So what is it doing in Sefer Shmos? If anything, you would think that this is really part and parcel of the service of the Kohanim, building of the Mishkan. So why, first of all, there's so much detail given to it, which is, just so many psukim, and the instruction, and then the implementation. Really hundreds of psukim. As a Baal Korah, you can appreciate the repetitive nature, it would seem, of how much goes over and over again. But, so that itself, obviously the Torah wants to give tremendous detail, and there is tremendous messages to be learned from all the detail. But what's it doing in Sefer Shmos, which is dealing more with the formation of the nation, becoming a nation, and not in Sefer Vayikra, which really deals more with the service and the functionality of the Mishkan and the Kohanim. Right? So that's, again, one overview question that we need to find out. One of the garments that were worn by the Kohen Gadol is known as the Me'il. And the Me'il had bells at the bottom of the garment. And the Pasuk says, we're going to see the upcoming Parshios, when it describes it, it says, V'nishma kolo, that they would chime, they would make a noise to announce his introduction to the Oel Moed when he would come in, so therefore they would chime before he entered. V'nishma kolo b'vo'el HaKodesh, when it come in. So the Medrash says something fascinating here. The Medrash says, I believe it's the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Mikan, from here we learn that even when a person enters into his own home, he should first knock. Same way as the Kohen Gadol was announced by the chiming of the bells, so too, that's the message, the life message for us. That you have to knock even on your, and don't think it's you're walking into your own home, you knock, you're going in, you should still, Now the truth of the matter is that is intuitively, that makes sense without having a pasuk. Right? With bringing us there's a concept of modesty, a concept of, knock on the door before you come in, just let people know, announce yourselves. But the Rabbi Yochanan's going out of his way saying that is the message. There are different messages from the different begodim. There's certain things that actually in certain part clothing atone for certain sins. It says that the me'il, the bells of the me'il atone for lashon hara. That which makes sound should come and atone for the sin that makes sound. We've spoken about exactly why that and how that works. But so he's saying the other message is the life message, an important message. Knock on your door before you enter your house. Now the question really has to be asked is, we agree that that's a life message and that's an important message. How do you see it from the fact that the Kohen Gadol had the bells? If anything, it's not a good proof. Because whose home is it? It says, Vasuli Mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, V'shachanti b'socham, and I will dwell within them. So it means you're building God's home. So if anything, the bells announcing the Kohen Gadol is really going into, when you're going to somebody else's home, you're walking into, Kohen Gadol is walking into God's home, he's announcing. So, as we said, intuitively, we understand the message. But how do we see it from the case that it's been bringing? You don't see that. Mikan, from here you see that you have to knock on your own door before you walk into your own house. That's not true. You don't see that. That might be true, but that's not what you see from here. From here you see when you go into somebody else's home, you have to knock on the door. You don't see if you go into your own home. So how's it bringing that as a proof? What's Rabbi Yochanan talking about? From here you see that. I mean, first of all, why do you need that as a proof? And second of all, how do you see it? You don't actually see it over here. It's not going into your own home, it's going into God's home. Right, so again, the overriding question is like, what is it doing here? In Parsha Terumah, Tetzaveh, Vayakov, Pekudah, what is it doing here, the building of the Mishkan? Why is that in the Sefer that's dealing with the formation of the nation, as opposed to be in the Sefer that's dealing with the Torah HaKohanim, the laws of the Kohanim, and the service of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash? Why isn't it there? Was one question. Second question is, the most specific one is, that there is a message here that's being taught that you see from here, from the fact that Kohen Gadol had these bells at the bottom that announced him, the pasuk says it announced him, you have to knock on your own door when you're going to. It doesn't correlate. We don't see that. How do we see that from here? It's very interesting the way Rashi understands the sequence of the verse of the parshios. They're actually out of order, because Rashi learns that the purpose of the Mishkan was an atonement for the sin of the golden calf. That after they served the golden calf, there was some type of distance created between Jewish people and God. And they had to build the Mishkan as an atonement. Yet we know that the sin of the golden calf appears in Parshas Kisisa, which is 2 parshias away. And yet we're already discussing the building of the Mishkan now. So Rashi has to learn that the Torah is not a history book. It doesn't follow it's not a linear progression. It's not historically following the historical events. And therefore, it is out of order. Right? Which is an interesting thing. So what it means, according to Rashi, if there had not been a golden calf, then there would not have been a Mishkan, which needs understanding too. How does that work? I mean, so we need to get some insight into that as well. The primary pasuk that the commentaries deal with is that this obligation to build a Mishkan, Vasuli Migdash, make for me a sanctuary. So now if you're going to have parallel structure, right? God is telling the Jewish people, you need to make for me a sanctuary. V'shachanti, so that I may dwell. What should the noun be? Right? Make for me a mishkan, a sanctuary, that I should dwell within. That's what it says, but that's not what it should be. What it should say is, make for me a mishkan, so I should dwell within it. Right, that's what it's saying. The purpose of the whole structure is to dwell in, that God should dwell on the mishkan. Yet that's not what it says. The pasuk says, "Asuli Mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, so I should be able to dwell v'shachanti besocham, in them." What's that mean, right? So there's different explanations in the commentaries. One of them is that it's in the plural because this doesn't only apply to the Beis HaMikdash, it applies to all your shuls. Anytime you build a shul, make for me, then I will dwell within them. Within, that's all we know that a Beis Knesset is considered a Mikdash Me'at. It's like minor sanctuary, minor Beis HaMikdash. That's the idea. There are others because that learn, and we'll get into this as well. Besocham means inside each of you. Make for me a sanctuary that I may dwell within you. That would be able to, somehow building the sanctuary makes a godliness within us, which needs to be understood. How does that work? How does that, because we build a sanctuary, now God will be able to reside within us. So we need to understand what that means as well.
So wherever you go, wherever you travel, you are Hashem with you all the time. So when you go into different city,
He'll be with you. But how does building the Mikdash create that? Why does building the Mikdash create that sense that God is with us and within us? How does that create it? We know that, very interesting, the quintessential convert in the Torah, in the Sefer Tanakh, who's known as the quintessential convert. So we had Yisro last week, Yisro was a ger, but we have the laws of conversion are not necessarily learned specifically from Yisro. Where do we learn many of the laws of conversion? From Rus. In fact, it's common custom, a woman that converts often takes the name Rus. Rus was a very righteous woman, and she went through tremendous sacrifices to stay with her mother-in-law, and the discussion between her mother-in-law and her going back from Moab back to Eretz Yisrael, that discussion of the mother-in-law telling what kind of hardships she's going to have if she's going to go with her and want to convert, right, is where we learn many of the laws of how we're supposed to deal with somebody coming to convert. And in fact, different than most other religions, Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. We don't embrace people that want to convert. We have more, we've learned in last week's Parsha, there's tremendous halachas focus given on once a person converts, how sensitive you have to be to that person. But the hardships and the difficulties that we make somebody coming to convert is we almost like we push them away before we allow them to come in, which is different than other religions. Other religions are out there trying to proselytize, incorporate and embrace. So it's interesting to note what mitzvos the Beis Din are supposed to tell a convert. Don't sit there and go through 613 mitzvahs, right? They'll reach old age before you finish. You never get through that. But there's certain ones that they focus on. And one of them is mezuzah. That you're supposed to tell the convert, the person who wants to convert, about the laws of mezuzah, which is very interesting. Why? Out of all 613, that's the one you need to pick on. There's a few that you pick on, but that's the one, based on the verses, the reading of the verses, the Gemara in Yevamos talks about you have to teach somebody about the laws of mezuzah. It's fascinating, that would be the one. One last question just about mezuzah itself, and we'll go through the questions again, is that the word mezuzah itself, we've spoken about this at a number of times, mezuzah itself just means doorpost. So it's very interesting, we're defining the mitzvah by the doorpost. Right? Tefillin, mezuzah means doorpost. Now, tefillin, for example, refer to the actual boxes that contain the scroll. It's like referring to, we'd start calling tefillin arm. We don't call tefillin arm. There's a mitzvah, the object of the tefillin, that's the mitzvah, and you put it on your arm. Right? The object is the shofar. The object is we don't call it lips. The shofar is not lips. It's the shofar that you put in your lips and you blow. So why are we referring to the mitzvah of mezuzah as the doorpost instead of giving a name that definitively describes the actual scroll that you're putting on the door? Why is it that it's not, that's referring? It's a very interesting question. I mean, they don't find that by any other mitzvah that we're calling it not by the object itself, but that which is subject to which you're putting upon the object. That's right. So let's wrap up the questions again. Let's see if we can get some kind of answer. So we're trying the overriding question we says is what is Terumah Tetzaviv? What is it doing in Sefer Shmos, which is the formation of the nation, should be in the service of the Beis Hamikdash. It's a question, the Me'il, how do we learn from here that you knock on your own door, Kohen's going into Hashem's house, it says you make for me a sanctuary that I should dwell within them, which says I should dwell within you. What do you mean within them? How does that work? And if it means within every individual or wherever you go, God is within you, how does that help from building a sanctuary? We asked the question that the order of the parshas are a little out of order. And according to Rashi, it seems there would be no Beis Hamikdash, no Mishkan, if they had not sit in the golden calf. So then what would there have been? It's hard to understand how that works. We asked by mezuzah, why is that a mitzvah that's important to teach a person who wants to convert? What's the message there that's saying is, no, if you're going to convert, you're going to have to do the mezuzah. Okay, big deal. I mean, you're telling you're going to convert, you have to, there's many other mitzvahs, that you can't use your cell phone on Shabbos would be a lot more of a deterrent than you got to put on a mezuzah, that's, but why is the mezuzah called mezuzah, which just means a doorpost, and it's not focusing on the object of the mitzvah. So this is a very, very important foundational class in terms of how we're supposed to run our homes. It's a very, very, I think, important yesod, and I think it's critical in fundamentally understanding what Yiddishkeit, what Judaism requires of us, as opposed to perhaps what's going on with some of the other religions in the world. And I think also then getting an understanding of how we create a successful home too, in terms of the right environment for our marriages and our children. We are living in a time that has seen a rise of a phenomena that has been dormant, I would say, for the last maybe 20 years. In the 60s and 70s, this was a much debated issue. And actually, this is the one area where conservative Jewry, which, by the way, is a dying institution, they're trying to revamp themselves. But the one thing that they had in the 50s and the 60s that kept them going and actually gave them an infusion that was not being able to be offered by the Orthodox and was being fueled, if you look at some of the reasons why, like Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and the greatest rabbis of our generation were very much against it, it was fueled by feminism. The idea that women felt they had no expression in the spiritual realm of Orthodox Jewry. That's the whole idea when mechitzas started coming down, and the idea, can women be rabbis? Can women daven for the amid? Can women be counted in a minyan? All of these laws were very, very heavily debated as part of fueling the part of it was really dragged along by the concept of feminism issue that was at the forefront. Gloria Steinem and that generation, where that's I guess late 60s, early 70s maybe, and it was pretty much dormant. You didn't hear much about it in the 80s and the 90s, and even though, as I said, conservatism tapped onto that, because we're going to allow equality. There's going to be egalitarian expression in our synagogues. Women bas mitzvos, those type of things.
Pink tefillin.
What's that? So today, in the last, let's say, 3-4 years, you have a new phenomena that has arisen. These women that call themselves, I guess, WOW, right? Women of the Wall. It's nuts what's going on, and it's every Rosh Chodesh. Happens to be today's Rosh Chodesh Adar, but every Rosh Chodesh now they came up with a solution that they are not happy with. But the solution, basically, the issue was that every Rosh Chodesh, they would bring a Sefer Torah, women would come, put on their tefillin, and want to make their own service at the wall, because this is a Jewish wall for all Jews, and why should we only be doing it one way? And it was almost like, it was like a zoo. My daughter was in Eretz Yisrael, so the seminaries, which are the Orthodox places of learning for the girls, would charter buses early on Rosh Chodesh morning to go take up all the chairs on the women's side, so that when these women would show up, they would have no place to stand. So then they would do it on the promenade, and then there was chairs being thrown, and there was like stones. It was really out of control. And I'm not debating the motivation of these people. That's not even the question. The question, why is there that rise for expression that they feel that you don't see as much like in the Orthodox movement per se, in the normative order? There's more left-wing Orthodoxy today, or open Orthodoxy, which really was, it's another expression of what used to be conservative Jewry that now is trying to say within the parameters of halacha, even though philosophically it's shamayim va'aretz, from normative Orthodoxy. Where's it coming from, that need for expression that, I just remember, listen, my mother, when I was a little kid, and my own wife, they were happy. Shabbos, get a couple more hours of sleep, and everyone's out of the house. They did not need to feel to go daven for the amidst. That wasn't their push on a Shabbos, that they had to be there to be one of the 10 for the minyan, or have an aliyah. That wasn't driving them, and it's a very strong personality, strong-willed individual. Why is there that sense, that need, that today is existing, or that existed, let's say 20 years ago, was fueled by feminism, but again, it's being fueled, that is not, that we don't find a need for that per se, in hundreds, if not thousands of years of Jewish women. So I'll share with you, I think it's such a tremendous yesod. The Ramban, Nachmanides, in his introduction to, I believe it's Sefer Vayikra, I'm not going to be making a mistake, but I remember seeing it, I don't remember it was in Torah, but he says an unbelievable idea. He says that the notion of building a Beis HaMikdash, or a Mishkan, is that we're supposed to create this structure and then replicate it in our homes. The idea of building a Mishkan, of building the Beis HaMikdash, it's not in and of itself what the ultimate relationship that God wants to have with us. He's just giving us the blueprint of what you see there. Now copy that and bring it into your own homes. And we find that Chazal is replete with this notion that a shulchan is doma lemizbeach, that the mizbeach, the altar in the Beis HaMikdash, that's how your table should be. Meaning that these are just examples of what you should be doing at home. You have to be creating your home in a way that's replicating what the place for the divine presence is in the Beis HaMikdash. Which then I think that can explain at least this phenomena, and where perhaps these women, they might even be driven by L'Shem Shamayim, they want to have a relationship with God, they want to have that expression, but where they're missing the boat. Because the ultimate driving force in the home is the woman. The woman sets the parameters for the home. In fact, in Aramaic, the way we refer to a woman is the bitu, the bayit, the house. The house, the woman is called the house. It's not a knock on her weight or anything like that. But that is the idea. The bias is the house. In fact, you see, and I deal with this, I've been dealing with this for the last 30 years, unfortunately, sometimes the husband and the wife are not on the same level spiritually. If the husband is on a higher level spiritually and the wife is not buying in, it's not going to work. It's not going to work unless the wife buys in. there's going to be major problems. It's going to be a dysfunctional situation. The other way, that if the wife is brought in and to get the husband to schlep along, there's much greater chance usually of that working. Because the driving factor in the home, the parameters, the spiritual parameters of the home, is set by the wife. And this has got nothing to do with a stay home, not stay home. In terms of the capacity to create that environment for the children and for the house and the husband and the buy-in, that is the anchor. She's called the Akeres Habayis, right? We call that expression. She's the Akeres Habayis. What's the Iker? That's the primary, the function is the anchor to the home is the woman, is the wife. Which then I understand is that, unfortunately, society, the 21st century society, has almost deluded us into believing, that there's this equality, this egalitarian notion, we're both breadwinners, and women, the old Virginia Slim cigarettes commercial, with women smoking with "You've come a long way, babe." I don't know if anyone remember those. We can do whatever men can do. We can go to the army, we can fly airplanes. It's not. But the point of that is, it might be true, but there's things that a woman can do that a man can't do. A man can't be the anchor in the home. So, but what we've taken the woman out of the house, so then they don't feel that self-expression in the house anymore. So where are they looking for it? They're looking at the wall, they're looking for it in the shul, they're looking at it, but that's, if they felt it in the home, and they recognize the importance that they're able to set for themselves in the home, it wouldn't be necessary to do all of the other things that they're feeling, that void, that emptiness. But women don't have to count for a minyan. In fact, they don't have to daven with a minyan. There's no obligation. Minyan is on man. Man is chiyuv to daven with a minyan. Woman is a chiyuv to daven. But children seeing a mother getting up and davening Shemona Esrei every morning, or saying Shema, has a lot more impact on the home than the woman going to shul and davening in shul. I'm not knocking those women who want to go to shul and have the time to go to shul, wonderful. But they don't need their self-expression from that, because what they can do in the home, when they do it in the home, has a much greater impact on defining the home. And that just lends the idea to the... Now, using this Ramban, and I think this is really it's such a critical understanding of developing the Jewish home, that the Beis Hamikdash is not for itself, but it's for the development of, this is what every Jew is going to need for a successful home. That this is not put in Vayikra and Leviticus by the service, the Beis Hamikdash. This is put in the formation of the nation. It's part of the formation of the nation. This is how we're supposed to be setting up. You want to have a successful nation, you have to have successful homes. In order to have successful homes, this is what you need for your home. So this is the model for the home. This is to replicate in your home. Therefore, it's put in Shemos at the foundation of the Jewish people. This is what you need. You need to have that. God has to have a place in your homes. Which, by the way, we've said this many times, that the most successful marriages and most successful environment for raising children, obviously a person has to daven, you need siyata shmaya, that's the X factor. Without having God's help, we're not going to be successful, not in our marriages and not in raising our children. But it creating the environment that God is going to come and give blessing in the home. How does God come and give blessing in the home? Right? The Talmud Masechah Sota says that ish ve'isha, right, man and woman, ish ve'isha, share two letters, aleph, shin. The letters that they don't share is the yud of the man and the hey from the woman. So if there's peace in the home, then God, yud k, God will put his presence in the home. If not, what happens if you take yud k? What are you left with? Eish is fire. There'll be destruction in the home. We have to create the home that God is going to want to bring his presence into the home. Then when you go out to bring his presence to the home, then the person can have successful marriage, a person can raise healthy, emotionally, socially, spiritually, well-rounded children. That's such a critical piece. Shalom bayis, God wants peace in the home, and he wants to come into a home that there's peace, creating the right parameters for that. All the other nations of the world, right, view the person's home as his own domain. Right? I think what's the expression? The person is the king of his own home. There's like there's an expression in Latin, rex. There's an expression that means that a man is the king of his own home. That's how they view it. Meaning, you know, when you go to visit God, you go on once a week, you go on a Sunday, that is when you go to God's home. What happens behind my closed doors, I'm responsible for my own home. Don't come and tell me, even like there's all these things, and the government should not be creating laws about what could happen in my home. My home is mine. It's not. Don't make rules for me in my own domain. My domain is mine. It's not for anybody else to tell me what to do. We don't believe that as Jews. As Jews, it's actually the opposite. Even that which you can feel mostly is yours, we don't feel that way. We feel we're creating God. This is God's home. You're walking into someone's home, you're walking into God's home. The idea is you have to realize your home is a replica of the Beis HaMikdash. We're creating God's home. This is what we're creating over here. How do we show that? Right. You put your name usually on the post. You walk into someone's home. There's the Joneses, right? You put on the fence, you put on the doorpost, on the door. That you put the Joneses. You know what name we put on our doors? What do we attach to the doorpost? Okay, God's name. Shin Daled Yud is God's name. We're putting God's name. The idea of mezuzah is to show that you're entering into God's domain. That's the idea. You're entering into God's domain. Now that's a huge philosophical change when a person wants to come convert. You're telling them a huge transition from your home being your own home and you can do whatever you want behind closed doors. This is God's home. There's many laws that apply both in the bedroom and in the kitchen and in the living room. There are laws that you are going to have to make. This is God's home. God has a presence here. This is his home. It's God's name. You're putting God's name on the door, which therefore comes out very beautiful understanding. So I heard my Rosh Hashiva, this beautiful understanding of mezuzah. We name the object of the mitzvah, the shofar, the lulav, the tefillin. The home is the object here. The object of the mitzvah is you're turning the home into God's home. So it's not the scroll. The scroll is just the name that you're putting to the object of the mitzvah. So it's called mezuzah. Mezuzah is the doorpost. The object, the door, the doorpost, the home, it's all becoming God's home. So it's the object is the home. That's why it's referred to the frame of the door is the mezuzah. That is the object of the mitzvah because we're defining what the object of the mitzvah is. The object of the mitzvah is not the scroll. That's the name we're attaching to the object of the mitzvah. So we're referring to it as the mezuzah. That's what we're referring to it. But the overall understanding over here is that the idea of what a Mishkan, we have to look at the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan is, that is just to teach us not what we're supposed to be doing there. What is that supposed to be teaching us? What we need to be doing in our own homes, transforming our homes into a place. Vasuli Mikdash, you make for me a Mikdash so that you will learn from there how to do it at home. And then, V'shachanti b'socham, then I'll be able to go and dwell within your homes, within you, because that's what you're going to learn from the Mikdash. The Mikdash is to allow me, I'm going to be in the Beis HaMikdash, but that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that I should be able to come into you, be within you, in your hearts, in your presence. And it could be that if there was no Chet HaEgel, but still God would need to be within us. It's just that after the sin of the Chet, it's much more difficult to God to be within us. It only has to start from Beis HaMikdash, then he comes into our homes. Hopefully, ultimately, he'll come to within us. We need that. Without it, maybe he would have been able to go straight that concept of the godliness within us. We lost that when we built the Beis Hamikdash, when we built the ego. But ultimately, it's to go into our homes, come into us, that we live. In fact, the Avos, who reached the very high pinnacle of connection to God, are called the Markavto. They're God's chariot. Means they were God's chariot. The Avos, they reached that level. We're not on that level. Let's start with trying to get God, the presence in our homes. Then the next step is getting presence within us. To call ourselves chariots of Shekhinah, we're not ready to be called chariots of the Shekhinah, but they were. But that's ultimately is that we are His ambassadors. We reflect His image. We are His people down here on earth, to be those the ambassadors, to be the shining light for everyone in the nations all around us. But it starts with creating our homes in a way that will be shalom bayis, creating the right parameters in our home, that God should be able to rest in our homes, ultimately rest within us. And that's ultimately the message of what we take from the Beis Hamikdash.